This is the fourth day of our Faith at Home series, and today we're talking about holidays at home, specifically Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I have decorated part of this room for those two holidays, moving all my April, May things so that I could have a little bit of holiday flavor. But one thing that doesn't move and is always in the same place is this creche, is this manger scene. Now, over the years, I've accumulated maybe 60, 70 different scenes, or what I like to call expressions of the Nativity, because I don't have full nativity scenes. I don't have 70 full nativity scenes, but I do have a lot of different nativity scenes. And over the years, I've been gifted so many unique ones, and a lot of them from different cultures, and they're just really special. I didn't unpack all of those. I only brought out a few things, but this particular one stays year-round in my house. And this belonged to my parents, and they bought this for the first Christmas that they were married, which was in 1959. And we've had it ever since, and I now have it. And they bought it at Grant's in Syracuse, which was a department store that I compare to places like Woolworths, and it was very special at the time. And you can see that these pieces, these nice painted pieces, have aged over the years. In fact, here's my angel. An angel with a little broken wing. To me, that makes it even better. There are a couple reasons why I keep this out year-round. One is that it becomes the treasured piece. I have a lot of different nativities, and by quality, you could say I have a lot of nicer ones. This one is so special because this has a simple enough quality. But my parents purchased it for their home for their very first Christmas. And that was many years ago. It was 1959. So that this Christmas would be 61 years. And what really impresses me is that was one of the first things this newly married couple purchased to celebrate Christmas was a manger scene to put in their home. And that, I think, says a little bit about their faith. And as it's been passed down over the years, it's a reminder to me of keeping Christmas and of putting Christmas in its proper place, in its proper perspective. The other reason I keep it year-round is that Jesus is with us year-round, and it's important for us to remember that Jesus is in the world. Now, one of the things at Christmas time that is different than now is Jesus is not in the creche from the beginning of Advent until Christmas Eve, and then he returns. Now, I have 70 nativities, but I do not have 70 separate little Jesuses. But on Christmas Eve, about 13 or 14 little baby Jesuses are put in all their creches. And that's a special moment, as that signifies the birth of Jesus. So that's a little tradition that I follow here. But the manger scene reminds us again of the nativity of Jesus. And I think it's a really important educational tool, and it makes for a pretty nice decoration too. We will be talking today about some of the traditions and some of the things that move from church to home that touch people's hearts, as today we talk about holidays at home. One of the things that I think we often remember is all the different things that happen to holidays, either when we were kids or that you have carried on as adults with your own kids, of these little traditions that now seem so precious and so important to our faith. Even the way that we did table grace at the meals at Thanksgiving and Christmas, or the gift giving. I know with my family growing up, the Advent candle, we didn't decorate for Christmas until like the 18th or 19th of December. The tree would go up and we'd put decorations up. and our first family party was like the 22nd or something. But the Advent candle on the very first Sunday of Advent, which sometimes was right after Thanksgiving, as you know, would go at the center of the dining room table. And we had this little, and I wish I had it with me because we have one of those over at church, you know, those little tiny snuffers. So we loved it if it was our job to snuff out the candle. But we would light the Advent candle, read the devotional, and we would do that every evening at dinner at Advent, which really made that holiday different for us, especially since we didn't really do anything about Christmas until the week before Christmas, which was really something. Do you have similar traditions or things that you remember from either holiday, Thanksgiving and Christmas? I sort of put those two special holidays sort of together in terms of traditions.
I remember growing up and going to my grandparents, and the whole family would go there, and she had a huge living room, huge dining room, and we just had table after table. It was about 30 of us, just table after table after table, all pushed up together, going from one room to the next. And we all had to go around the table and say what we were thankful for. And I had lots of
before dinner, like before you ate.
Yes.
Wow.
And I had a lot of these little boy cousins, and they were just salivating at the food. They're looking at the food, and they're just, it's so hard. And when they get to them, they'd say like one word and, you know, pass it on, you know. And then you'd have a couple of your older relatives. I think my Aunt Frances was one that would just talk on for a while and a while and a while. And it's like, these kids are getting so antsy, they just want to eat. And it's like, but I can say by the time it went all the way around the table and grace was said and everybody could start eating, you didn't hear a pin drop for at least 10 or 15 minutes because everybody, they're passing the plates and passing the bowls and everybody's just eating and eating. And, you know, they had a little bit of a wait to eat. So they were all very thankful. That was one thing they were thankful for, is to be able to eat and pass the dishes.
Finally Aunt Grace stopped with all her gratefulness.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just, it was like,
that is funny.
Yeah, but it was really nice. Some of the things that people were thankful for, it was, you know, relating to things that maybe happened in their individual family that was a blessing. And so it was nice. It was nice to connect with all your aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents and hear what they were thankful for.
And that is nice, because it is probably, even if your family, because I know that you grew up, a family was close by, but to have everybody gathered for that big holiday, that's like the one real kind of time to check in.
And it's nice to find out what good things had happened in all the individual little families that you might, you know, it's their inner circle, their inner family. And you might not have known about it, but it was nice to hear that they'd had some kind of a blessing that they were thankful for. And that just was kind of nice. You had all these blessings and all these good things that happened. And it's kind of set the tone for the beginning, because Thanksgiving is the beginning of, you know, because then we get right into Advent after that. So it's a season to begin.
I love Thanksgiving because it is a special day, and it really is a day when you really can set aside everything else and think about.
And it's just such a family day. It's just like
it is. Yeah. And because except for a lot of food, it does have the food as a special part. But I mean, Christmas is special, and the season leading up to Christmas is special. But there's so much to it that Thanksgiving is still simple enough, you know. And that's why I think sometimes I get frustrated when we're pushing holidays in the way of other holidays, because it's like, give Thanksgiving some space. And of course, I was really thankful this year because the Buffalo Bills beat the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. So that was especially enjoyable. I just had to say that. Martha, now you just in not that long ago had a big family gathering, like in churches and bowling alleys. I mean, you have a big family still. Family gathering still.
When my nieces and nephews were small, when they were kids, everybody came here. This house was full. Wow. My aunt Hazel, who lived over in Pennville across from the feed mill, my mother would ask her to come, would you like to come to our house for Thanksgiving? And she would say, well, can I wait and see who else? Because she didn't like all the noise and stuff, so she wouldn't always come. But she came quite often. My dad would pick her up in his milk truck on his way home from the milk route, and she'd come. Our house was always full. My sister would be home from wherever her husband was stationed in the military, And when they were in Germany, she would call at some point during the day and we'd all get to talk to her.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a neat thing too, because Thanksgiving
Mhm.
after we do the dinner at the First United Church, we do the community Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm involved with that. And then I go to my dad's, and that's just a small gathering, but the rest of the family calls in at some point, and you do get to check in with each of them, and that is
Right.
something really special
Right. To connect.
about that
Absolutely.
day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even today, my sister's family has kept that tradition, and they invite Lester and I whenever they have a family, whenever it's a holiday that they're getting together. They always invite Lester and I to come too.
Yeah, and that's nice. And you've actually even gone up to her to where she's been
Right.
living, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that's neat. But I think one year it seemed like you reserved State Street's Fellowship Hall for your meal. And I think I made a joke and said I could have reserved the cloakroom for my family size. I mean, there's only like 6 of us or 5 of us.
Not
No,
long after my grandma died, my mother and my uncles wanted to have Thanksgiving together, and so we had it right there at State Street.
yeah, that's
And we
nice.
did it for a couple of years after that.
Now I know for all 3 of us, because our church paths have crossed several different times in different ways and places. Christmas Eve was always a big moment for all of us for the candlelight service, and it still is at a different location.
A different setting, but still the same service. Yeah.
But that was always so important for the candlelight service. Actually, I always was amazed that I still, as an adult, I'm always surprised that New Year's Eve that I can barely stay awake for the midnight, and yet on Christmas Eve we start
It's like
at 11.
so much
We
excitement.
light those candles at 5 of 12, and it is so meaningful. And
It's like the Christmas spirit comes alive. You know, then it's really Christmas. I mean, there's so much hubbub and so much preparation, and you're just crazy up to it.
Everything.
You know,
Everything else falls away. You know what actually has changed a little bit for me too in my thinking, because that's always been the way. It was like I didn't even know if I would have the same sense of spirit, and then all of a sudden it happens at 11. It just happens. But in the last couple of years, that brunch service that we do at Pennaville has really done something for me. It started out on Christmas Eve, but then whenever the Sunday is. So one year it was Christmas Eve. Well, one year it was we did it on. Yeah, so it was Christmas Eve because the Sunday was Christmas Day, and then the next year we did it on a Sunday, Christmas Eve, and then now we just do it the Sunday closest. But it's really neat the way that has because that has all that kind of Thanksgiving feel. I think with that hubbub, lots of people gathered around the table, lots of celebration. But we also have this sense of anticipation of Christmas that is so nice that somehow you get in that room just a little bit differently. And then I think it's so meaningful to me because just the next day or a couple days later, we're then gathered in that sanctuary at 11 o'clock at night. And we have the traditional candlelight service that really from my teenage years on was always so important at State Street.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's just so beautiful at midnight to be singing Silent Night, and just to the glow of those candles is beautiful.
It is.
But when you go out, you have such a renewed spirit, and it's just beautiful. The feeling you get when you leave that service and you go out and see the stars and the snow and the cold and all of the hubbub, it's all gone. It's just Jesus' food. You know?
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's just Jesus and you and you're in a community of people.
A Christmas tradition that's very important to me is the Christmas cantata that's held at our church now for 46 years. And I started back when I was 16, and so that makes it 46 years I've been singing in that group. It's been very meaningful to me because it gets me starting to think about Christmas and decorating and everything to do with the holiday. So, and throughout the years, I've sung many solos through it, and one of those songs I loved was Precious Baby, and everybody loved that song because I had just given birth to Gregory. He was, 2 months old. So I remember Beth Castillion was our piano player, and she told me, just pretend you're carrying Gregory in your arms while singing that. And I think that was one of my best performances that night, and I'll never forget that. So I just wanted to share that with you.
That's nice. Both Thanksgiving and Christmas are really important family holidays, and they're a wonderful time when you have a lot of different groups together. And through those different opportunities, a lot of traditions are sparked. I have a couple little things to share here. One is I just have a coffee cup that says rejoice. And one of the things I like about this is this actually has the 10th and 11th verses of Luke chapter 2, which I'll be reading in a moment. And that's the birth narrative in Luke. But something that you could do is fun with hot chocolate or coffee is that whoever gets this mug gets to read this story on Christmas Eve or whatever time. You could be doing it a couple days before. You could certainly do it during the Christmas holiday, which of course begins on Christmas Day. The 12th day of Christmas is actually the 5th of January, which is the day before Epiphany. And then, speaking of Epiphany, another nice tradition is to hand out, if you're having a gathering or when you have family, is to hand out maybe a different ornament or a different thing each year. This is actually a bookmark that has an ornament attached to it. And this is the Christmas star. And I gave these out at an Epiphany party one year. But it has a nice poem on it. It's a nice way of really sharing a new tradition or spreading a tradition. And this poem is: a star in the sky, so bright and light, over the land was quite the sight. It led the way for the wise men three to the child of God who would set men free. And that's just a nice simple way of maybe starting a tradition. One of my favorite writers is Anne Weems, and she wrote Kneeling in Bethlehem among many other books. And she has some wonderful poems about Christmas. I'm just going to read a couple. And again, these are nice little traditions. And this you could certainly do over a meal or some quiet time where you're sharing together. I'm going to read this that's called Unexpected. Even now, we simply do not expect to find a deity in a stable. Somehow the setting is all wrong. The swaddling clothes too plain. The manger is too common for the likes of a savior. The straw inelegant. The animals reeking and noisy. The whole scene too ordinary for our taste. And the cast of characters is no better. With the possible exception of the kings, who among them is fit for this night? Shepherds, certainly too crude. The carpenter too rough, the girl too young. And the baby? Who expected a baby? Whoever expected the advent of God in a helpless child? Had the Messiah arrived in the blazing light of the glory of a legion of angels wielding golden swords, the whole world could have been conquered for Christ right then, right there. And we in the church, to say nothing of the world, wouldn't have so much trouble today. Even now, we simply do not expect to face the world armed with love. That tells poetically the story that I'm going to read from Luke chapter 2. In those days, a decree went from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over the flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. For see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all people. To you born this day in the city of David a Savior who is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger." And suddenly there with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace among those whom he favors." When the angels had left them and gone into the heavens, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds had told them. But Mary treasured all those words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen as they had been told them. One of the familiar carols for Christmas, "O Little Town of Bethlehem," took on a new meaning when I was told the story of Winston Churchill when he came over here right after the Pearl Harbor attack. And he was here over the Christmas holiday with FDR, and they were planning what the next steps were for war. And the FDR and Churchill lit the Christmas tree the night before, and that was a surprise to the nation because they really thought the tree was going to go dark. But it was important to our president that light is brought into the world as Jesus, the light of the world, is being celebrated for his birthday. Well, the next day, Winston Churchill went with the Roosevelts to church, and the only carol he ever was familiar with was "O Little Town of Bethlehem." His mother, who was born in America, used to sing that to him. And he heard those words and these words, "Yet in thy dark street shineth the everlasting light," gave him such hope in such a dark time. So Lisa's going to play and sing this for us.
Still we see thee lie above thy deep and dreamless sleep. The silent stars go by, yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. How silently this wondrous gift is given. So God imparts to human hearts the blessings of his hand. No ear may hear his coming, but in this world of sin, where meek souls still receive him still, our dear Christ enters in.
Christmas was really a wonderful time in our family up until 1953. 1953 was the last time that we would think about celebrating Christmas as a 3-unit family, mother, father, and then myself. Because on the 21st of December, 1953, my father was tragically killed in an automobile accident right at the end of our road. So it was a long time before I looked at Christmas the same way. But the one song that I would remember is the one that my father and I sung in harmony. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin, mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, wondrous star, lend thy light, with the angels let us sing. Hallelujah to our King. Christ the Savior is born. Christ the Savior is born.
Beautiful. Beautiful.